I am going to show you how to create a simple pet plugin using Paper's MobGoal API. First things first, I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to name it PetGoal, and this is going to implement goal of mob, and it's also going to implement a listener. And I'm just going to write down all of the variables that we're going to need. This is going to be a final key mob. We'll name that key, and this is going to be goalKey.of mob.class new namespace key, and then this would be your plugin namespace, and then whatever key, this would just be called pet, and then the private final mob, just name it mob, that is going to be the pet variable, and then a living entity, which is going to be the owner, and then another living entity that is going to be the mob's target. Two booleans, one is going to be attack players, and I default that to true, and attack mobs, also default to true. This is basically signaling should the pet attack players, and if the pet should attack mobs. Pretty self-explanatory. Then 3 doubles. One is going to be move distance. If the pet is out of this range, it is going to walk towards the owner. And then we're going to have max distance. If the pet is out of this range, it's going to teleport to the owner. And then one last one, which is max forget target distance. Now, if the pet is out of this range and it has a target, it's going to just forget its target. And that is all the variables that we're going to need. Now let's make the constructor. So public pet goal, and it's going to take in a mob, which is going to be the pet, living entity, which is going to be its owner. And we're just going to set each of these variables respectively. And you can make other constructors where you can put in the move distance, the max distance, all that. I'm just going to make another one in which I'll copy this, and you can put in attack mobs and attack players. And now I need to implement the methods for the mob goal. I'm going to put all these in. And should activate, I'm going to put that to true. Should stay activate is going to be should activate. And then the start is going to be bucket.getPluginManager.register events. It's going to be this, and we just need to get the plugin. And then on the stop, handle list, unregister all, this. That's all you need in those two functions. And the tick is where all of the magic is going to happen. And plop in the key for this. And now get types. Because we are not overwriting and removing the vanilla mob goals on the pet, I don't think this matters as much. And then we'll do target. Usually that's what I do, and it seems to work fine. A few other functions are going to need to be added before this tick function, and that is going to be public living entity, and that is just going to be get owner. I'm just going to return this owner. And then a public boolean is valid target. Put target. And if the target is not valid, so if it's dead or invalid for whatever reason, or if it equals the owner, then we're going to return false. It is not a valid target. And then if target is a player, well, then we just want to return if that does not equal creative and it does not equal spectator mode. So if that player is in creative mode or spectator mode, it's going to return false. It is not valid. Else if target is instance of a mob, well, we want to get the ghoul of the mob. We get ghoul, and we're going to pass in the key. Now, if that ghoul is an instance of this pet ghoul, well, then we want to check, will we return pet ghoul.get owner equals owner. So if that mob has a pet ghoul and that pet ghoul's owner is this owner, it's not a valid target. Otherwise, we're just going to return true at the bottom. Next thing is a set target function, which I'll put it right here. We're just going to put set target, new target, and then if is a valid target, this new target, well then target is going to equal new target. And now we can start going into our tick function, in which this tick function executes every tick that the goal is active for. So if target equals null, then return, and in that, if owner.getWorld, if that does not equal mob.getWorld, return and mob.teleport. And that'll prevent any errors from happening for this next part. Mob.setTarget, null. And then we want to get the distance of the owner and the mob. And if that distance is greater than the max distance, teleport back to the owner. Otherwise, if the distance is greater than move distance, mob.getPathfinder.move to owner. And that'll just move it to the owner, exactly what it entails. And now, if they do have a target, and if that target is invalid, return target equals null. Then get the distance of the owner and the mob. And if that distance is greater than the max for get target distance, target equals null and return. Otherwise, we're going to set the target. And we are setting the mob target to null here. So if you have a pet zombie, it's not going to try to automatically target something else that you don't want it to target. And that is it for the goal functions themselves. Now it's time for the event handlers. And this is going to be an entity damage by entity event. This is only needed if you want your pet to damage other players and mobs. And owner attacks entity. So if the event damager is equal to the owner, well then the owner just attacked an entity. If that entity is the pet, return and set cancelled, because we don't want them to attack their pet. If the damaged entity is not a living entity, well, then we want to return. And if that victim, so that the entity that has got hit, that is instance of a player, and the attack players is set to true, then we can set the target of, we actually don't need that. Just set the target to victim, and if the victim is a mob and attack mobs is set to true, then we'll set the victim. And you can turn here. Now, entity attacks owner or the pet itself. If event.get entity equals owner and the get entity, like before, it is the victim, or if it equals the mob, the pet. And if the damager is not a living entity, return. And we can just copy this thing, these if statements, and replace it with damager. So if the owner attacks an entity right here, it is going to trigger the pet into attacking whatever the owner just hit, if they're able to. And then if a mob attacks the owner or the pet is going to target that. Now, you can make it so if the pet already has a target, then it's not going to set the target. So right here, we could just do if it's not a living entity, or if target doesn't equal null. And you can copy that right here. So if the pet already has a target, then it's not going to change targets. Now we need one more event handler. And that is going to be entity remove from world event. And if that entity equals the pet, then the handler list dot unregister, and this is just going to unregister all the events. The last thing you need to do is spawn the mob and add that ghoul to it. But how do you do that? Well, I'll show you. I'm using the menu creator I've used in my previous video, and I made a pet menu. All it does is if you click on the spawn egg, it'll spawn that specific mob right here, and all you have to do is bucket mob ghouls and add the ghoul. And you need the priority. The higher this is, the less priority. And the new pet ghoul. And that'll be mob and the owner, which is the player. Now, keep in mind, some of the mobs are a little wonky with it. For example, the fox. I'll show you an example in game. But because we're not removing the vanilla ghouls, and how you would do that is you get the mob ghouls and remove all the ghouls from the mob before you add the ghoul. Now if I spawn a zombie, I'll use in this demonstration, I spawn a chicken, so that's my pet, I can't attack him. And if I attack this chicken, he's going to attack the chicken. There you are. And if I attack a cow and I get too far away, which is 40 blocks, that I've said it. It will just forget about the target and teleport. He only teleports because the max distance is 16. You can mess around with those values. If I get hit by this husk, he's gonna attack him and they're gonna go into a little brawl. Keep in mind, the pet will still take fall damage, and he still will die. That's all up to you to change whether you want to make him invulnerable or not. This is just a simple demonstration on how the paper mob ghouls can work. And I'll test out some of the other one. I'll show you the fox. You can see he gets to me and then he just starts running away constantly. And that's just because of his AI. There's really nothing you can do about that unless you remove his vanilla ghouls and make a completely new one. And then there's also, if I punch the cow, he's not going to attack it. Oh, he is going to attack it. In which that is all vanilla behavior. We're just manipulating it using the paper mob ghouls. We get something like a blaze. Nice. What happens if you do a creeper? You're just gonna explode? Yeah. A few things I should mention is the mob ghoul does not persist after the mob being unloaded into a chunk or a server restart. You would have to find some way for it to remember that it's had the ghoul and then add it back. But that would be a different video, different time. This is a simple pet plugin. That's it. Farewell.